Welcome to our fifth Community Strength and Balance online education workshop. Today I am super excited and very grateful to welcome Wendy Scanlon to talk to us. She's a New Zealand registered nutritionist and is going to talk to us around nutrition messages for older adults in our classes. So we'll just start with a ACC karakia. Feel free to join me if you like. Whaia, whaia, whaia te tika, whaia te pono, whaia te aroha, mō te oranga tangata, kia puta ki te whaiau, ki te ao marama. Humia, huia, tai kia. Alrighty, so as I said earlier, Wendy Scanlon's joining us today. She is a New Zealand registered nutritionist with a master's in community nutrition. She currently works with Puāwai, a community nutrition program in Otutahi. And formerly, she coordinated a wonderful sounding program called Senior Chef, which was an 8-week cooking program aimed at preventing malnutrition in the community. She hopes through her mahi, she can give people the skills and motivation to live long and healthy lives. And I'm sure that we will all agree that she's doing a great job at that. So welcome, Wendy, and I will let you take over.
Thank you so much, Hills. Kia ora, everyone. No tamaki makara aho, ko Wendy Scanlon, toko ingoa, ko Aote, mātanga kai te ora, ki Puāwai kai, he tangata tariti, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So as Hills said, I'm a registered nutritionist and I love kai, I love talking about it, and I love supporting people to have better health. And as she said, I currently work in a community program, nutrition program called Puāwai Kai. Puāwai means to blossom, so we're wanting people to blossom through the way they're living and particularly around the food they're eating. Senior Chef was a program that we ran previously. We have adapted Senior Chef to now be available across the lifespan. So Senior Chef was only available to people over 60, but what we realised is that if people couldn't cook or had limited cooking skills, then they weren't going to make changes to the way they were living. So I will tell you a little bit about Puāwai Kai at the end of this session. Here we go. So I'm sure you're all very familiar with this, but I've just popped a few stats around ageing up in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I mean, I guess the big thing is that we've got this ageing population and that by 2028, 1 in 5 people will be over the age of 65. But we have this great discrepancy with life expectancy among Māori and non-Māori. You'll see there. I'm one of the fortunate ones. I'm a non-Māori woman, and my life expectancy is about 81, compared to a Māori man who's only 73. So what we're trying to do is trying to work in an equity framework to bring those up so that everyone has a great life expectancy. But the other thing that I'm really interested in the work that I do is looking at our health expectancy. And by that, I mean not only living a long life, but living a well and healthy life. And we know that lifestyle has a huge factor that is important in health. The other thing that I guess, just to explain a little bit about the Senior Chef program that we ran, was that it really came out of a piece of work that was done here in Christchurch in Otutahi. And what they did is they surveyed community living older people around malnutrition or the risk of malnutrition. And the things that popped up were people who were living in isolation, people who had unexpected weight loss, but really interestingly, people with limited cooking skills. And out of that research, Senior Chef was born, because what we wanted to do is we wanted to bring people together to try and sort of help alleviate that social isolation, and also just improve people's cooking skills. And what we did usually find, it's a bit of a generalisation, but we found that men that came along to Senior Chef had kind of been shooed out of the kitchen most of their life and had limited cooking skills. So if they had, if their significant partner, other person in their life had died and they were left, then it became a real problem. For the women who came to Senior Chef, it was often that they'd cooked their entire lives and they were just really sick of cooking. And at the ripe old age of 57, I can kind of put my hand up already and say that, some nights you just don't have the motivation to cook. So Senior Chef was all about giving confidence and motivation, and we've brought that through to our new program, Puāwai. So I just want to start with taking probably a much broader approach to health and thinking what a healthy life needs. And there's I guess, relatively new area of medicine called lifestyle medicine, and they talk about the 6 pillars of a healthy life. Feet, forks, fingers. So feet is all about being active and moving more, which is your bread and butter. Forks, what we eat, the kai we have. And here we're looking at a move from that ultra processed diet to a more whole food diet. Fingers relates to substances like cigarettes and alcohol. I guess they use, the old finger thing. Sleep, having a good night's sleep, how we manage stress, and really importantly, the connections we have. So how we connect to others, whether it be family or friends, so love. And you'll be all familiar with this next, I guess, paradigm for a healthy life, te whare tapawhā. And you can see those relationships between the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. That, to be grounded in your whenua, to know who you are, to have connections, to look at your physical health, so, your movement, how you're eating, but also your mental and spiritual health. So that may be things around, well-being, having that sense of, stopping and taking notice, all those 5 ways of well-being that we're quite familiar with now. The magazine cover on the right, the National Geographic, is around blue zones, and I really love this concept. Some of you may have seen, I think there's a program on Netflix currently around the blue zones. I haven't seen it yet, but I've certainly read quite a lot about it. And this was done by social geographers to looking at the areas around the world where people live the longest, but also have great health. And so there are actually 5 of these areas, and you'll see in that slide those blue dots, they're right across that middle range. So we've got one going from left to right. We've got California. That's a Seventh-day Adventist community there. Then we've got Costa Rica, and then we've got 2 in the Mediterranean, one in Italy and one in Greece. And then right over, we've got one in Japan. And these are all very different communities in terms of wealth, poverty. Some are probably more rural, some are less so. But what they discovered, the social geographers, is that they had 9 things in common. And if you go around them, fundamentally, these people, were living, they had the highest concentrations of centenarians. And they are one of the, I guess, the key things is that they are always moving. Moving comes naturally, and there's always ways. There's often big gardens involved. There's often walking involved. There's often traditional ways of movement like Tai Chi or dance. So they really embrace movement. In terms of what they're eating, it's very much that whole food diet. A little bit of fish, the Mediterranean, but really lots and lots of vegetables and lots of whole grains. So we're going to talk about whole grains a little bit later. And then some of the other things that are around that circle, it's things like having connections with family, but also knowing that you have a purpose in life. And they often talk about the blue zones, the people there never quite retiring. And, that's sort of my hope for our older population in New Zealand, that they're given that really sense of worth, sense of purpose is really important. The other thing is downshift. So they know how to manage their stress. They know how to take time out. And then there's this one called the 80% rule. And that really relates to, I guess, that concept which you've probably heard of, mindful eating. And actually, I think probably our older population are quite good at this. If I could teach some of the younger people around this, I think it would be a good thing. So that's things like actually sitting down, having all your food on a plate, including snacks, really being mindful of what you're eating. And also all of these communities, the blue zones, they tend to not overeat. They tend to know when they've had enough. And they talk about the 80% rule, not overfeeding yourself, but knowing that you've had enough. The other thing is, yes, I said plant slant, wine at 5. Now, the actual community in California, they don't drink alcohol. I think the thing with the wine at 5 goes back to those connections, having time together. Family times are really important, and belonging. So a lot of these communities will either have, I guess, a traditional faith space, or they look to other nature, or something bigger that helps them in their lives. So that's the blue zones. And I really encourage you, if you can, to read a bit about this. It's really fascinating, and hopefully maybe there'll be a blue zone in New Zealand one day. So I've got a few messages that I'd like to share with you around older people. I think there's a few myths that go along with aging, and I hopefully will dispel those as we go along. So my first kind of message is that all of us, no matter what our age is, really variety, and it sounds a pretty boring concept, doesn't it, variety, but it is so important. So having a variety of foods each day. If you have an older person who starts restricting the range of foods, that's when you get those red flags for malnutrition. So we're really encouraging to have a variety of foods. I love the concept of a healthy plate because it's really simple. It doesn't go back to, serving sizes or portions or anything. It's a very simple concept, and it's often used a lot in diabetes education or cardiovascular disease education. So, and it's something that we use in our program. So as you can see, the first thing that you notice about this healthy plate is the colour. And that's because what we're encouraging people to do is to make half their meals vegetable based and some fruit. And I guess for older people, we'll talk a bit about vegetables later, but and I think, again, for everyone, and the thing that comes across in our program is, unfortunately, the cost of living crisis that we've had and the expense that food is costing. So I direct you to our website, Puāwai. We have some really hot tips on, I guess, trying to make the budget go a bit further. Ideas there. The other website that I really encourage you to look at is a website called Love Food, Hate Waste. And it's all around just using basic foods, basic ingredients, and using them well in a healthy way, but also how to minimize leftovers, wastage rather. And I think often with older people, it's that thing, because a third of them live by themselves. I'm only cooking for one. How do I get variety? How do I not have a whole lot of, stuff that I have to throw out? So Love Food, Hate Waste is a really good resource. So we've got that half plate, and then we've got a quarter of good quality protein, and that's so important. And again, we'll talk about that later. And then we've got that quarter plate of whole grains. Now, carbohydrates often get a bad rap. We're not talking here about white bread or any of those highly processed carbohydrates. We're talking about carbohydrates that really have a very high percentage of dietary fibre. The other thing I'd say is that some of the people that you might be having a conversation with may eat in quite a traditional way. They'll have their meat, they'll have their vegetables, and they'll have their potato or kumara. Lots of people you meet won't be eating that way. So I often say to people, maybe just have a look at your recipes. We probably only cook about 8 to 10 recipes, each month. They kind of get circled around. So let's see how we can maybe up the vegetables in your usual savoury mince you might make. How can we add more? And if we're saying we want 2 to 1, if we're using, say, 500 grams of mince, you know, how are we getting more vegetables to get to that? Well, it's a kilo, isn't it? So it might be that you're using extra canned tomatoes, or you're using some extra frozen mixed vegetables, or whatever, you know, whatever's in season, whatever's cheap. So looking at recipes can be really a good way to start as well. So going on from there, loving your vegetables. So why do we nutritionists harp on about vegetables? Well, there's lots of great research looking at vegetables. The first thing that vegetables are usually very high in is dietary fiber. And so to get the dietary fiber, we want to try and eat them whole. We want to try and have skins on where we can. That's where a lot of the fiber is. And we know that this dietary fiber acts as almost, it's, you know, called, you would have heard that expression, prebiotic. And so that fiber is used in the gut to feed our microbiome, to feed those bugs. So we want diversity in our bugs. We want the good bugs to reign supreme. And that's why we need to have quite a good amount of vegetables each day. The other thing that that dietary fiber does is it's like, you know, those old-fashioned bottle brushes. Well, it's a bit like that against your bowel. So it's scrubbing it lovely and clean, and hopefully preventing things like diverticular disease, and actually hoping to lower people's risk of bowel cancer. So that's really important. The other thing that vegetables have, and you can see again by that colour, is they're very high in all those antioxidants. And that has a really big effect on disease prevention. Most diseases start with some kind of inflammation, whether it be, you know, diabetes or cardiovascular disease or cancer. So by having these antioxidants, that lowers our risk of diseases and helps prevent them. Healthy weight, that's important as well. And the thing with healthy weight is that if we're eating quite a plant-based diet, it's quite bulky. Again, it's quite fiber. So we're going to feel fuller, and we're going to feel fuller for longer, and we're going to feel more satisfied. And that's really important. It's not saying that, you know, we don't have other foods. And in fact, for some older people who are losing weight, we want to make sure that we are getting those other aspects of food in as well. And then lastly, there's been really strong research to suggest that a diet that's high in vegetables and fruits is going to be good for our mental well-being. And they've done studies, this is with younger people, with teenagers, but looking at increasing, you know, their amount of vegetables, and that significantly affecting their mood and episodes of depression. If you want to delve into this more deeply, there's the Smile Diet work in New South Wales. So if you want to go and have a look at that, and that's looking at this, what we'd probably call a modified Mediterranean diet, and how that affects well-being. So I think the thing with vegetables, and I guess like all of us, is, you know, often growing up, and I know, you know, for me, when you'd say to someone, oh, what are you having for dinner? You know, they'd often say, oh, I'm having sausages, or I'm having chops, or whatever. We don't, in the Kiwi culture, I guess, traditionally, we haven't put a lot of emphasis on vegetables. And you talk to many people and they talk about the, you know, the Brussels sprouts that are kind of boiled to death, or the grey cabbage, or I know my husband was made to eat broad beans, and we can never have broad beans again in the house. So firstly, I think it's trying to get people accessible to really easy ways of cooking vegetables, and some more interesting ways of cooking vegetables. And another plug again for our website, but we've got quite a few recipes. Vegetables.co.nz have got lots of great ideas around vegetables. And as I said, Love Food, Hate Waste as well. So, and Heart Foundation also has some great ways to use vegetables. So sometimes it's just about finding a little bit, getting that mojo back and enjoying vegetables more. The other thing is things that are easy if you live by yourself, and something that I really love, and I guess we're kind of going out of this season, but soups. Soups are a great way to get plenty of vegetables into your diet, and usually a really easy way to eat them. some older people may have issues with certain vegetables or certain textures or certain skins. So the good news there is that when vegetables are cooked, so they're a lot softer, you don't actually lose the dietary fibre. You still have that dietary fibre. But sometimes there is a need to work around those special requirements as well. And, it might be, if you have a cup of tea or coffee after your time together, you might want to do some fun questions around vegetables. What's your favourite way to cook them? How do you stop your broccoli going off? That kind of thing. So it's just bringing it to the front of the mind, I guess, around the whole idea of vegetables. Okay, the next one I'd like to move on to are whole grains. And as I said before, and I guess this is a carbohydrate, they often can get a bit of a bad rap. But what I'm really saying here is that we need the whole grains in our diet because they're a really good source of dietary fibre. The general requirement for the recommended daily intake of fibre is about 30 grams a day. And in New Zealand at the moment, we're only getting about half that at 18 grams. So the more that we can tweak it and try and up that dietary fibre, the better we are going to be. So for older people, I guess the couple of things that I would start looking at would be, what are you having for breakfast? Because often it can be, maybe it's white toast and a cup of tea. So how can we change that up? And so that's maybe the bread they're using, might be the breakfast cereal they're having. So usually when I do this presentation, I'm with you in a classroom and we can talk to each other and we can chat and we do some activities. So one thing that we always do is we look at some labels on packages, and I usually choose breakfast cereals to do this. Can't do this with you today, but I have brought along a little label and a little saying that I think may help you, and this is something that you might want to do. You can try this. So the little saying is 10, 10, 5 to stay alive. And you'll see here, well, firstly, let's just say nutrition information panels are really tricky. They have huge amounts of information on them. They're usually in size 6 font. We always supply actually a little magnifying card for people so that if they want to look at the bread, they want to look at their breakfast cereal, they can do that with, much more easily. The other thing to say is that food manufacturers are actually wanting to sell their food. So they often put, like other sort of things that put you off task or put you off track. And really what I hope just with this little exercise is you see what's really, really important. So if I was looking at perhaps, say, a breakfast cereal with an older person, I'd be hoping that they had enough fibre and that it probably wasn't too sugary. So going back to 10, 10, 5 to stay alive, what we're looking at, and you'll see here on the red column, we want the total fat to be less than 10 grams per 100 grams. We always look at the 100 gram column. Don't worry about the serving size because, of course, serving sizes vary depending on what the product is. And that can be a bit off-putting too, because, I mean, hey, sometimes I've seen a small bag of chips says it's 2 serving sizes. Now, no, we'd just eat the whole thing, wouldn't we? So don't worry about that. So less than 10 grams, less than 10 grams of sugar. And this is the really important one, the dietary fibre. So we want more than 5 grams. And you see this would tick the box. Something like oats. Good old oats, for the people who love a nice creamy porridge in the morning, it's about 11 to 12 grams per 100 grams of dietary fibre. So such a great choice and gets you off to a really good start in the morning. Okay, that's just a quick breakdown. So 10, 10, 5 to stay alive, and fat, sugar and fibre. So maybe tonight go home and have a look at your bread and look at your breakfast cereal. You might want to look at your yogurt in terms of sugars. because often they will have sometimes lots of added sugar. So, and your breakfast cereal. We do this and we have Cocoa Pops in the lineup. And of course, Cocoa Pops is, I think it's about half sugar. So there you go. Now, this is probably one of the most important areas for older people, and that's our protein intake. Now, by and large, New Zealanders get enough protein over the day. We've got great sources of protein in New Zealand. Traditionally, of course, we've been, a lamb and hogget country, so we've had a lot of meat. And we are trying to knock that back a bit and have, again, more variety in the sources of protein that we have. Firstly, I'd just like to say, excuse me, I'm just going to have a wee drink. With older people, and I guess with everyone too, but older people, what happens is that your requirement with protein does go up. And, you're doing an amazing job with people in their strength and balance and helping improve muscle mass, because we don't want muscle to be lost. And we also need to be feeding our muscles with protein. And really, we want to be feeding protein across the day. We don't want to just have that protein-rich meal at the end of the day. And I liken it to, say if you have a big bucket and it has a bit of a hole in it. If you were just to fill a little bucket of water into it, it would just go out. If you kept a hose running, we could probably keep the water level or the muscle mass up. So that's what we're trying to do with our diet. So again, we want to have protein at every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and if we're having snacks in between. And again, I ask, maybe if you're stopping to have a cup of tea after your classes, what are you providing? Is it a packet of biscuits? Or maybe it's some cheese and crackers, or some crackers with hummus, or, something like that, that's actually saying protein is important, and let's get away from the ultra processed foods and have some really good quality and delicious morning tea after your class. So you'll see from that picture there are lots of different ways, foods that include protein. Probably the more common is the meat. We don't need to have meat, and we're trying to really encourage smaller portions of meat and leaner meat. You'll also see there fish. Canned fish is a good option. It's often a little bit more budget friendly than fresh fish. And, again, making it into senior chef, one of the most famous recipes that we would do is a good old-fashioned fish pie. So thinking about how I can eat more fish during the week, and a vegetarian meal. And this morning on our Facebook page, I just put up a really lovely red lentil dal, and we used to cook that at Senior Chef as well. And it was made with carrots, so it was lovely and creamy and sweet and really, really yummy. And you'll see there's seeds there, there's nuts there as well. Eggs is another great source of protein. And again, if people don't know how to cook eggs, they're not going to eat eggs. So it's, having that ability to cook to enjoy these foods as well. So that's going to be really important for strength and function. Moving on to that, we've looked after our muscles, I guess, with the protein intake, but looking after our bones. And I know that you're going to have someone come and talk to you about osteoporosis. And so really, I guess in a way, I should be talking to teenagers about looking after the bones, because this is a lifetime thing that we want to do. And particularly with women after, menopause, with that drop in estrogen, we will get bone loss. So it's trying to really minimize that bone loss. And so what are the kind of things that we can look to do? Well, we know that being in that healthy weight range is really important. We don't want people to be underweight, and we don't want people to be carrying a lot of extra weight. So the other thing there is, and again, it probably goes back to what's happened earlier in life, but one of the things that we don't want to see is we don't want to see yo-yo dieting, where people decide that they need to lose weight. They lose weight, then they, it might be a quick fix type diet, go back to what they've usually eaten, and then it goes up again. And then suddenly it's like the stock market, and we're going up and up and up and up. So we don't want that. The next thing is eat a wide variety of food. So that comes up yet again. And there seems to be quite good evidence, and maybe it's around the quality of food, the quality of the diet, but people with good intakes of vegetables and fruit seem to have lower risk of osteoporosis. The next one is the calcium-rich foods, and generally in New Zealand, those are our milk and milk product group. I know there are a lot of people who perhaps were sworn off milk from the days of the school milk. So it is quite tricky if you're taking out that group to get enough calcium. And that's where variety comes in, because you will pick up calcium from green leafy vegetables, you know, some of the bony fish, but it's in much smaller amounts, and you have to eat a lot more. And often for older people, sometimes the appetite's not so good. So, you know, it's trying to find ways. So I often say to people trying to cook with milk or cook with yogurt. So if you're making a soup, adding milk to it, or if, you know, you're making a dressing for your salad, make it out of some Greek yogurt with a bit of lemon juice, things like that, so that you're actually cooking and using milk, not just having to sit down and drink a glass of milk. There's also research to suggest that the sugary and diet soft drinks, a high intake of those is not good for our bones. And whether it's the actual, you know, the carbonation, or whether it's the fact that people who, you know, drink these drinks then displace other foods. So they're not perhaps eating that wide variety of foods, or maybe the calcium-rich foods. And then finally, we have vitamin D, which I'll go on to next about looking after your bones. So vitamin D, two things happen when we age, is that our sun doesn't absorb vitamin D as well. And that's sunshine is where we get our main source of vitamin D. And also our kidneys have trouble sort of activating vitamin D, because vitamin D is needed in that calcium metabolism. And if you don't get enough vitamin D deficiency in children is rickets and osteomalacia. And so there's all these, you know, consequences of not getting enough vitamin D. It's a tricky one, because we've got lots of sun-safe messages which we really need to abide by, because we don't want people getting skin cancer. The Ministry of Health recommendation is that in the summertime, we try and get a little bit of sunshine early in the morning or late in the evening, you know, later in the evening, when it isn't as harsh on our skin. In winter, we can tend to make that wider. So daily walk, putting the clothes on the line, those kind of things. We need about 20 minutes a day. But in reality, you know, I live in Christchurch. It's cold in winter. People rug up. People don't go outside as much. People with darker skin are at much more greater risk of vitamin D deficiency. So it's again looking at people's risk factors around vitamin D. So if they do cover up, if they do live in the South Island, then it's about a conversation with a health professional, a GP, about whether supplements are needed. We get on to the fun stuff now, I guess. So I hope you've got some Downton Abbey fans out there. But probably one of the most important things we can encourage for our community, and I guess, again, it's for all of us really, but older people, particularly if they live by themselves, is to share meals together. Any opportunity to have a community meal, or to have eat with family and friends, I really encourage. Again, you know, research shows they've done it with people who received Meals on Wheels, and they looked at what they consumed. And when someone sat with them, and I guess maybe that's that whole mindful eating, social connection, they ate more. If they were by themselves, they ate less. So if we want to get all those amazing nutrients into our bodies, it's great to have that social connection and social time together, as well as that connection that we need for a healthy life. And that brings me on to what I do in my day-to-day work. So as I said, I had formerly been involved with Senior Chef, and we had another program called Appetite for Life, which didn't have cooking component. It was just coming along to learn how to look after your health. And what we found with Appetite for Life was that unless people knew how to cook the food, they weren't going to make changes. And there were a lot of younger people coming to Appetite for Life who didn't have good cooking skills. We saw great things happening in our older community with this, but the younger people couldn't be part of it. We were also noticing that older people often had those lifestyle conditions of diabetes, heart disease. So what we did is we took both programs, Appetite for Life and Senior Chef, and molded them into Puāwai Kai. And that's one of our pilot groups that we ran. So in Christchurch, it's free to attend. People can either self-refer or they can get a referral from a health professional. We tend to find that they mainly come from health coaches, practice nurses, a few from GPs. We get community agencies referring people, community support workers, allied health. We get physios and dietitians. And so people come together for 2 hours each week. The first 3 sessions are really around looking after your health. So we start with how we eat, how do we have a healthy relationship with food, and how do we feed our bodies regularly. Week 2 is all around nutrition, what we need. And so these messages that I've presented earlier, they occur in our program as well. And week 3 is around all those other aspects that are important to health. So we link in, we sort of have a discussion around ways people can become more active. What are their barriers? You know, what can they link into locally that would be good for them? A little bit around sleep hygiene and managing stress and the 5 ways of well-being. And then the fun begins in week 4, where we actually get in the kitchen. So we enroll about 16 people in each course, and they cook in pairs and have lots. And we're really budget friendly, whole foods cooking. And every week from week 1 to 8, we sit around the table and share kai together. And that's often where lots of the learning and discussion happens and talking. And yeah, we've had some great feedback. People really feel really welcomed into our course. We're very much a small change approach, behaviour change approach. We're not a diet plan. We're not into dieting. That's not our way of working. The other thing is that often people will connect with other people. We run one, we've got a beautiful new pool in Linwood, which has a kitchen and a community room. So we use that as a venue. And the last one we hooked up with some people 4 women who've decided now to go and swim together every week. So it's that kind of thing that can come out of a program like ours. So we're really proud of it. It's been really well piloted. Yeah, so wouldn't it be great if we could offer this all around the country? But funding is an issue for us. We were with the PHO. We're now with Purupuru Whetū, who's a Māori kaupapa organisation here, who have welcomed us with open arms. So we're really grateful to them. So I think what I might do is, I don't know if I need Campbell to play this or if I can just click on it. This is one of our videos that we shot.
We do have a couple of questions, and I will ask Wendy those, but please, if you have other questions, either raise your hand and we might be able to take you off mute, otherwise pop them in the chat. So the first one, Wendy, what do you suggest, and you did cover this a little bit, but what do you suggest for teens that are lactose free to ensure they get enough calcium? And I know, like, I'm a parent of children who are allergic to dairy, so yeah, quite common.
I guess the main thing would be to be using a soy milk that's calcium fortified as their main milk, and using that in your cooking and trying to get as much in there. There are also soy yogurts, and then I think the other thing is that just having a healthy relationship with food. So you're a good weight, you're neither underweight or overweight, and that you're encouraging a real wide range of foods in your teenager. And probably to, if you can, you know, I've had 3 teenagers, I know what they're like, but trying to get more water, less of the fizzy drinks, that kind of thing as well, because that's going to really set you up for good bone health. Yeah.
Cool. And the other question, you've probably already seen it. I wholeheartedly agree. This sounds like a great program. Is there potential in the future to expand it to other regions around the South Island? And I'll go with the North Island too.
Yeah, well, look, we would love it to be expanded. I mean, but honestly, we've had everyone needs to write to Te Whatu Ora on our behalf. We would love that. I do know the Nutrition Foundation in Auckland. So if any of you live in Auckland, they do a seniors cooking program that runs for 4 weeks. So if you just Google New Zealand Nutrition Foundation, it comes up on their website. That's a great wee program. In fact, they kind of took it, it was before I came on board, but I believe that, they used some of the senior chef material to kind of mold it and get what they wanted. Senior chef was 8 weeks, they've gone down to 4 weeks, but that's something that's available in the North Island, not just Auckland.
Okay.
And I think they may have teamed up with one of the, or maybe Ryman's or one of those organisations to try and roll it out, because they were literally applying for, like community funding to get over the line each time, which is not a really good way to be operating. So that's good to hear.
That is awesome. I've popped links to all those things that I could find
in
the
cool.
chat, and we'll also send them out with the recording. So yeah, if anyone missed any of those, there was lots of gold nuggets there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, continue.
Can I just add, we have in the South Island Health Info, I think in the North Island it was Navigate? I think it's changed its name, but I really highly encourage you to go onto they're consumer information sites, and they're well researched and they're well reviewed by health professionals. So for instance, in the older person section, you'll get things like, what do I do if someone comes to me and says they've lost their appetite? How can I help them? So there's information around that. Or if someone's lost weight, what do you do in that circumstance? There's some really basic, healthy eating messages as well. So, and cooking for 1 or 2, shopping and planning, all those kind of things. So it's a really good resource. So that's Health Info, or I think it's Healthify. Yeah, that's it there.
It's Healthify now on Health Navigator. Yeah. Cool. And another question, is almond milk a good substitute for cow's milk for postmenopausal women? That's the first part.
I think the thing you need to just be careful with, and I not off the top of my head can I tell you, but the plant milks are a lot lower in protein than cow's milk. So that was the first thing I would check. My preference would probably be a soy milk. I think almond might be the next one. Something like a rice milk, and that has to be used when people have got allergies, but it's very low in protein. So check what the protein is, and just to make sure that it's being calcium fortified. That's really important. Yeah, particularly if it's a postmenopausal woman.
And the last part of that question is that they couldn't see mushrooms in the protein visual. Is there a reason?
I guess with the mushrooms is you'd be having to eat an awful lot to get the equivalent protein. It goes a little bit back to a bit like the calcium thing. But, love mushrooms. Go for it.
Awesome. That is, I think, the end of our questions for today. So thank you so much, Wendy. It was it's just so much information in your presentation, and then the myriad of resources that you also shared was awesome. It'll keep me going for a good month or so, and we'll share them out with the recordings as well.
Sorry.
No, you go.
Oh, I just want to say a big thank you to you guys, because you're on the front line too, doing all your wonderful work in the strength and balance area, and preventing people from having falls and having hip fractures, and keeping people connected. And as I hope you realise, I think that's just as important as the kai we eat as well. So thank you.
Cool. And a reminder, we have a session next week as well. Next Monday will be our final session. Please note there is a new time. It's going to be slightly earlier, 12:30 till 1:30 next week, and that will be on bone health. So I will send out an invite to you shortly later today regarding that one. And yeah, we'll fire out the recording to this as soon as it's ready as well. Please send any feedback, through to us, any questions, and yeah, we'll fire out the recording next week when it's ready as well. So thank you so much. Thank you to Wendy. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll just finish with the karakia to send you off on your way safely. So whaia, whaia, whaia te tika, whaia te pono, whaia o te aroha, mō te oranga tangata, kia puta, ki te whaiao, ki te ao marama. Homie, huie, tai kia. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Look forward to hearing from you soon. And yeah, thank you so much, Wendy. That was wonderful.
You're welcome. Thank you.